Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're in Volume 9, which is titled The Six Sense Spaces. We're going to be studying chapters 21 through 30 today, and what we do is we study the original words of the Buddha, having a student volunteer to read the chapter, or if no one volunteers, I will typically read the chapter, and then I'll share some teachings on that particular chapter, and then open up to any questions that you guys might have. If you're attending for the first time, you'll be able to actually participate in our study group because I'm going to be displaying the individual chapters that we're studying today. And then in the future, if you'd like to study prior to class, you can actually go and download the books from buddhadailywisdom.com, and you can read the books prior to class because the chapters from the Buddha are actually quite short, but then you're going to have some words from me to be able to further help you to understand and reflect on and practice the teachings of the Buddha. So any of you guys that are in Zoom, if you guys would like to volunteer to read any of the chapters as they come up, you're welcome to volunteer to read those by just electronically raising your hand. And then as I see your hand, you'll be able to unmute yourself and be able to then volunteer to read and actually do the reading. So I will start with this chapter 21, and as I mentioned, if there's anyone that would like to read that, feel free to raise your hand. This first one, chapter 21, is titled, One Must Put Forth Extra Intention, Effort, and Energy. Monks, though a monk be not skilled in the habit of others' thoughts, at least he can resolve, I will be skilled in the habit of my own thoughts. Thus, monks, should you train yourselves. And how is a monk skilled in the habit of his own thought? Just as monks, a woman or man or a child fond of self-adornment, examining the reflection of his own face in a bright clean mirror or bowl of clean water, should see there is a stain or speck and strive for the removal of that stain or speck, and when he no longer sees it there, is pleased and satisfied because of that, thinking, a gain it is to me that I am clean. So a monk's pondering is most fruitful in good conditions thus. Do I or do I not generally live with sensual desire, craving? Do I or do I not generally live with ill will in the mind? Do I or do I not generally live possessed by complacency? Do I or do I not generally live with restlessness and worry in the mind? Do I generally live in doubt, or have I crossed beyond it? Do I generally live with anger or not? Do I generally live with soiled thoughts or clean thoughts? Do I generally live with body aroused or not? Do I generally live sluggish or full of energy? Do I generally live uncontrolled or well controlled? Monks, if on examination a monk finds thus, I generally live with sensual desire, craving, ill will in mind, possessed by complacency, restlessness and worry in mind, doubtful, angry, with soiled thoughts, with body aroused, sluggish and uncontrolled, then that monk must put forth extra intention, inclination, aim, effort, energy, mindfulness, and concentration for the abandoning of those evil, unwholesome states. Just as monks when one's turban or head is ablaze, for the extinguishing thereof, one must put forth extra intention, inclination, aim, effort, energy, determined mindfulness, and concentration. Even so, for the abandoning of those evil, unwholesome states, one must do the same. But if on examination a monk finds thus, I do not generally live with sensual desire, craving, ill will in mind, possessed by complacency, restlessness and worry in mind, doubtful, angry, and with soiled thoughts, with body aroused, sluggish and uncontrolled, then that monk should make an effort to establish just those wholesome states, and further to destroy the fetters, taints, pollutions. Okay, so here the Buddha is talking about how one needs to arise this effort and energy in order to eliminate certain unwholesome qualities from the mind and arise certain wholesome qualities. What allows you to do that is the mindfulness. As part of the Eightfold Path, there's that mental discipline section of right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And when you are practicing right mindfulness, which is awareness of mind, that's generally how you can think about it when you first get started. But more specifically, the four foundations of mindfulness: having awareness of the bodily sensations that are occurring prior to the mind becoming discontent, having awareness of the feelings, those conditioned feelings of pleasant, painful, neither painful nor pleasant, having awareness of the condition of the mind for a few hours or a few days. If you notice that your mind is agitated or irritated and these kinds of things, you would like to be aware of that. And then the fourth foundation is called mental objects. These are deeply rooted containers in the mind, things like sensual desire and ill will and conceit and things like this. You need to have the awareness of all four foundations: bodily sensations, feelings, condition of mind, and mental objects. This is what's going to help you to be able to clean up the mind, purify it, and get it to this enlightened mental state. The Buddha describes here that just like an individual might look at their face in a bright, clean mirror or a bowl of clean water and see a certain speck or a stain, and you maybe have this striving to remove that from the physical appearance, the Buddha is saying that you should have that same dedication, that same diligence to be interested to remove these unwholesome qualities that he's talking about here. If the mind has sensual desire, ill will, complacency, restlessness and worry, and doubt, these are the 5 hindrances. I teach this as part of the group learning program as the very last class of that program, that these are the 5 things that will hinder one or obstruct one from getting to enlightenment. In reality, the 10 fetters are what's keeping you in the unenlightened state, and all of those things need to be eliminated in order to get to enlightenment. And 4 of these 5 are actually part of the 10 fetters, but the Buddha calls these out real specifically because they really have an obstructive way of hindering you from getting to enlightenment. Where sensual desire is this longing and yearning through the 6 sense bases, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind itself. This is the craving, desire, attachment, that mental longing, the wanting, the expecting, where the mind longs and yearns for permanently agreeable contact through the 6 sense bases. And if you get what you want, you get those pleasant feelings, but they're just conditional feelings. So because the mind is basing its inner feeling on some condition, then that means it can only be happy or excited if that condition is met. And then because that condition is impermanent, now when that condition doesn't get met, the mind moves to these painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, and others. So you're going to need to work on eliminating the craving, desire, attachment, and there's specific teachings that the Buddha shares to help you be able to do that. And then as you're eliminating craving, desire, attachment, it will help you to eliminate the ill will of the mind. This ill will arises due to the cravings not being fulfilled. When the cravings aren't being fulfilled, then the ill will arise. This is the anger, the hatred, the bitterness, the hostility, the animosity, the resentfulness. So as you're reducing your cravings, that's automatically going to help you to experience less ill will. But you do need to go in and actually work with the mind practicing things like loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness in your daily life through your intention, speech, and actions to be able to eliminate the ill will. Then you're also going to need to eliminate this complacency. This is like the dullness, the lethargic condition, the lack of motivation or enthusiasm, the unwillingness to learn and study and investigate the teachings and to be able to go forward with developing your life practice. So you can arise this motivation, this encouragement, this enthusiasm, this initiative, this willingness to do something through applying right effort, where you actively work to arise the energy in the mind. The enlightenment factor of energy is the exact opposite of complacency. The restlessness and worry, this is how the mind has overactivity and it can kind of worry about certain things. So you need to be able to eliminate that as well through bringing in the tranquility and the concentration and the equanimity. This will help you. Eliminating craving, desire, attachments will help you to eliminate the restlessness and worry, but also you need to actively notice that when the mind is restless or overactive, or there's worry or anxiety, that you can bring in this equanimity to calm the mind down and relax it. The doubt is when one has doubt about the teachings, doubt about the Buddha, the community, your teacher, or your own ability to attain enlightenment. This is very common that someone has doubt when they first come to the path to enlightenment, that they doubt whether the Buddha either lived or whether he was enlightened or he was wise. They might doubt the teachings, particularly if they haven't been exposed to the true teachings. They might doubt the community that they're part of, whether this community will actually be supportive and encouraging. You might doubt your teacher and their ability to actually help you to be able to get to enlightenment. And you might have doubt about your own ability to get to enlightenment. This is very common when you first start on the path to enlightenment. But you can harness this in a healthy way that just acknowledge that, yes, you do have doubt. And the way to eliminate that is not through blind belief or blind faith, but instead to investigate the teachings, examine them. The more you investigate the teachings and learn them, and then you reflect on them to independently verify them, and you practice them to transform the mind, as you see improvement to the condition of the mind, then you'll gradually eliminate this doubt, and you'll get to a point where you've seen so much progress in the condition of your mind in your life that you'll have no doubt that these teachings are leading to an improved condition of mind in your life. You won't be enlightened yet at that point, but you'll have no doubt. So if you're doing the meditation, if you're doing all the other things on the Eightfold Path and dialing that in closer and closer, you'll see the improvement to your mind and to your life. And that's how doubt gets eliminated, is through investigating the teachings and practicing them to transform the mind. This anger is actually part of this ill will, that if there's anger in the mind, it's coming from the ill will. These soiled thoughts, this is from the central desire typically. That is essentially connecting to that. The body being aroused, this is also connected to central desire. This is the longing, yearning for sexual contact. So if your body's aroused and you're constantly wanting to have sex, this is going to cause agitation because you're not going to permanently be able to have sex. So if you're noticing your body is aroused frequently, then you need to kind of calm this down through training the mind. There's specific training that you can do with that. This sluggishness is connected to the complacency, that is what occurs in the mind. When it's complacent, it'll be sluggish. And then this uncontrolled mind is connected also to central desire, because if you have central desire, oftentimes the mind longing and yearning through the sense bases, you don't have control of it. But if you restrain it and you can pull it back and train it with all the various teachings that the Buddha shares, you can get to the point where your mind's very well controlled. So as you examine your mind and you analyze your mind and you see these various aspects of the mind that are unwholesome, and it's the mindfulness and the concentration that's helping you to be able to observe that, then what the Buddha is saying is you need to apply extra intention, inclination, aim, and effort or energy to eliminate these unwholesome qualities from the mind. And he's saying, just like if your head was on fire, if you were wearing this turban around your head and it was on fire, that you would need to take extra effort, extra energy and determination in order to eliminate this and extinguish this fire. He's saying the same thing needs to occur for these unwholesome qualities that one is experiencing as part of having those aspects that we were just talking about. And then he says, okay, if you observe the mind and you generally don't live with these particular qualities, well, that's really good because you've made significant progress on the path to enlightenment. If you're not experiencing any of these, then you've made significant progress. But I suspect if you're attending this class and you're learning, you probably are experiencing at least one of these, if not more. So the Buddha is saying, okay, if you've analyzed your mind and you aren't generally experiencing any of these, then continue to apply this effort in order to eliminate the rest of the fetters, because these are all connected to the fetters in one way or another. And also even that complacency, you need to arise the enlightenment factor of energy. So he's sharing to continue to work on eliminating the fetters, which are the 10 individual pollutions that he discovered. And when you eliminate those, that's what actually produces the enlightened mind. So this is what he's sharing here in this particular chapter. This is chapter 21 of volume 9. And if you have questions, you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly.
Sure, I will alert. I'll pop in and let you know if I find any questions, but there's no questions at this time.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Max. All right, so let's move on to chapter 22. And here you can see the words from me in a table here to show you the unwholesome quality and the wholesome quality that you're going to need to cultivate in order to eliminate that. So you can use these books as a resource to help you further understand and develop your wisdom. Okay, so let's move on to this chapter 22, which is titled Excitement to be Abandoned in All Acts. Monks, if while he walks such sensual or harmful or cruel thoughts arise, and he does not welcome them, but rejects, expels, makes an end of them, drives them out of renewed existence, a monk who while walking becomes one who is called dedicated, diligent, always and forever strong in energy and determined. If while he stands such sensual or harmful or cruel thoughts arise, and he does not welcome them, but rejects, expels, makes an end of them, drives them out of renewed existence, a monk who while standing becomes one who is called dedicated, diligent, always and forever strong in energy and determined. If while he sits such sensual or harmful or cruel thoughts arise, he does not welcome them, but rejects, expels, makes an end of them, drives them out of renewed existence, a monk who while sitting becomes one is called dedicated, diligent, always and forever strong in energy and determined. If while he lies awake such sensual or harmful or cruel thoughts arise, and he does not welcome them, but rejects, expels, makes an end of them, drives them out of renewed existence, a monk who while lying awake becomes one is called dedicated, diligent, always and forever strong in energy and determined. So here the Buddha is helping you to see that this life practice that you're developing, it's more than just meditation. You're actually needing to become dedicated and diligent even outside of meditation too. This is where a lot of the work on the path to enlightenment is occurring. Yes, in meditation, you need to be meditating and building certain qualities like mindfulness and concentration, the ability to easily let go. You're also needing to build the quality of mind in loving kindness meditation where you've cultivated loving kindness. But you need to be applying these qualities that you're cultivating in daily life. That's where the real transformation is occurring, both in meditation, but also outside of meditation as well. So he talks about this dedication and this diligence that even while you're walking, standing, sitting, or lying awake, that you need to be sure that you're aware of the mind, and where you see any sensual, harmful, or cruel thoughts arising, that you apply this effort to reject it, expel it. You apply right effort to make an end and drive this out of the mind, cut it off and let it go. You're restraining the mind, you're pulling it back. And as you do that, eventually over time, the mind won't have those thoughts. But as you're getting started on the path to enlightenment, you're going to have various unwholesome thoughts that arise in the mind. And that's okay. That's where you're at in your practice. You haven't done anything wrong. But now, rather than being complacent, you apply the effort and energy to restrain the mind and pull it back. Here, the title of this chapter is called Excitement to be Abandoned in All Acts. Remember that this is conditional excitement. That if your excitement is based on some condition, like it's sunny outside, so I'm going to get so excited, or mom or dad are coming to visit, I'm going to get so excited, or my bank account is this amount, so I'm going to get so excited. That's what you're trying to eliminate. You're working to restrain the mind and eliminate it so that the mind no longer experiences conditioned feelings. You're rewiring the mind. You're decoupling the mind and rewiring it to now no longer experience conditioned excitement, but instead experience this unconditioned joy where the mind can just always be joyful all the time. And notice here this last paragraph where he talks about while he lies awake. So as you're dozing off to sleep or you're waking up in the morning, if you're noticing a central, harmful, or cruel thought arise in the mind, you'd like to cut that off and let it go. Eliminate it from the mind. Don't allow that to continue to persist. That's going to ensure that at all waking hours that you're attentive to the mind and you're being dedicated and diligent to cut out any unwholesome thoughts. And your breathing mindfulness meditation and your practice of generosity is helping you to be able to observe the thoughts with mindfulness when you're in daily life. And then when you notice that it's there, is to be able to easily let it go. And sometimes when you're just getting started, you might need to redirect the mind. Ultimately, you'd like to build the ability to internally cut those off, internally in the mind. But as you're first getting started, you might need to redirect the mind. So if you're sitting on the sofa watching TV, or you're sitting on the couch and watching TV, and some thought comes to mind, you might need to get up and go to the bathroom, or go to the kitchen, or go outside for a walk, or otherwise redirect the mind. Or if you're in a conversation with somebody and some unwholesome thought comes up, you might need to change the topic of the conversation to redirect the mind. There's various ways you can redirect the mind, and this will help the mind to be able to let it go. But over time, you'll gradually build the ability that you won't need to do that redirection, that you can just internally cut it off because your mindfulness will be so well developed and you'll be able to easily let things go. So you'll be able to observe it as it's coming and then be able to let it go. So let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and then I'll be able to help you from there. Go ahead, Francis. What's your question?
Okay, I understand about the fact that certain unwholesome thoughts come, that we just have to cut it off and let it go. But then you mentioned some examples just now about, let's say, this is really happening. My parents are coming over to stay with me for a long time. So is there anything wrong with that?
It's not about what's wrong or right. It's about retraining the mind to not experience these conditioned feelings. So if your parents call you and say, hey, I'm going to come over and stay the weekend with you, is that okay if I come stay the weekend? If you get all excited about that, well, now if they call you up a few hours later and say, hey, something came up, I can't come, you're going to be sad and you're going to be frustrated because you allowed the mind to get the conditioned excitement. So now when that condition is no longer there, your mind will move to the painful feelings. So if mom or dad calls and says, hey, we'd like to come over and spend the weekend with you, is that okay? You can be like, yes, that's great, mom. I really enjoy spending time with you, or whatever you're going to say, right? You can say those things and you can be looking forward to seeing your mom and spending time with your dad or whoever's coming to see you without this conditional excitement where you get so excited just based on this condition, that you understand that, okay, at this particular present moment, mom and dad say that they can come. And that's wonderful. To be great to see mom and dad. But at any point, they could change their mind, or something could happen with their transportation, something could come up and they might need to go somewhere else. So don't get attached to it. So it doesn't say it here. Oh, here it is. It's right here where the Buddha says he does not welcome them. Right? He usually says this in other places where he says you don't welcome it, you don't remain holding on to it, you don't cling to these experiences, because if you cling to mom and dad coming over, and now you start craving and longing and yearning for it. Now when they don't come, that's when you're going to be experiencing the painful feelings. So there's no harm in looking forward to it and being enthused that, yeah, this is great, mom and dad are coming over. But then you've got to recognize that it's completely impermanent and things could change at any moment. And don't allow your mind to go up when mom and dad are coming, because then it's going to go down when they're not coming.
What if they really came, and as planned, and so what would the right thought would be? I mean, I'm excited and all that, but I tell myself, okay, they're here, they're coming, or they're here now, or they're ringing the doorbell, they're right in front of me now. So I welcome them to the home, and so it'll still be okay, isn't it?
It's the same thing that you would like to do that with a calm mind, right? If you get so excited when mom and dad come, then when they leave, you're going to miss them. It's like, oh, I'm missing you so much. Like, please don't leave. Like, the mind is just holding on. So when you welcome a guest to your home, you can generally welcome them and have this genuine interest in seeing them and spending time with them and embrace them and show your care and your love, but you're not interested in clinging to them, wanting this thing to be permanent, so that way when they leave, you understand that, okay, they've left and I don't need to miss them. I don't need to feel disappointed. I don't need to feel agitated or annoyed. So when they show up, you understand right away, like, this is impermanent. We're going to have a great time. We're going to have a fun time together. We're going to talk. We're going to have great food. We're going to have wonderful conversations. We're going to have all this great time together. But this experience is temporary. So when it's over, and we just move on to the next thing.
Okay, I got it. I also do this practice and whatever. And sometimes, like today, I went to a place with an event with my friends from college, and it's over. And I just don't cling to that. If that's the way to get the day is over, so I just let it be. So I guess that's the way it should be,
Yeah, it's about enjoying it in the present moment without allowing the mind to get all these excited, conditioned feelings. So you enjoy it in the present moment, and then when it's over, and you just move on. And then if you experience that again at some point, okay, that's fine. You enjoy it for the moment. But if you enjoy it and you have these pleasant feelings and excitement, and then when it's over, you're like, I want to do that again. Oh, I miss it. I want to go back and do that. The mind's longing, yearning, because it's clinging to it. But if you can enjoy it in the present moment and then just move on and off to the next thing, then okay, now you're not clinging to that experience.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much,
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Looks like Max has a question. Go ahead, Max.
Yes, sir. There's a question on Facebook. I can't pronounce the name. Mayuli. Sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. I'm noticing that I have strong attachment and clinging to my kids. I get very discontent when my kids don't listen and are doing things that may cause harm to themselves, whether that's through their daily activities or food intake. I'm craving for my kids to be well. These thoughts often come up during my meditation and throughout my day. How can I dilute these cravings and clingings?
Okay, so a parent's attachment to their child is oftentimes very significant and very deep. There's multiple things you're going to need to do in order to eliminate your attachment to your children. There's one particular practice that you can do, which is referred to as contemplating death or reflecting on death, where you kind of sit, you close your eyes, and you envision that an individual has actually died, and you kind of walk through that scenario as if, like, maybe the police or a doctor or nurse or somebody like this has contacted you and let you know that your person that is close to you has actually died. And this is going to help the mind to confront this impermanence of death. And then you will probably grieve during that experience. You will probably feel sorrowful. You're not aspiring for this person to die, but you're just kind of walking through the process as if they have died. And you might need to do this 3, 4, 5, 6 different times perhaps in order to train the mind to be comfortable with this impermanence and this death. This is the ultimate way to eliminate attachment to anybody who's close to you, whether it's your parents, your life partner, your children, even getting comfortable with your own death. This is the same exact practice. It's called contemplation of death or reflection on death. And this is how you would do it. And if you'd like to talk about it, Mayuli, a bit privately, because there's this practice that you'll need to do with your children and anyone else who's close to you. But there's other things you're going to need to do too to train your mind to let go, because a parent is oftentimes very attached. Particularly mothers tend to be very attached to children, not always, but oftentimes they are, and fathers can be attached as well. But these children were inside the stomach and they were part of this body at one point. So the mind oftentimes becomes very attached to a child, and it needs to be able to let go so you guys can have a much more healthy relationship. And I can help you through that better in a private discussion, because you can share with me a lot of the different situations where you're experiencing the craving, desire, attachment, and I can help you with skillful ways to let that go. But this particular practice of reflecting on death or contemplating death is one of the main things you do to eliminate craving, desire, attachment to somebody who's close to you, among other things.
Thank you, Teacher David.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. And I appreciate your help there, Max. So I'm going to move on to the next one, which is chapter 23. This one is titled The Four Efforts, First Discourse. The Four Efforts, First Discourse. Monks, there are these four efforts. What for? The effort to restrain, that to abandon, that to make arise, and the effort to preserve. And of what sort, monks, is the effort to restrain? Here, a monk generates intention for the non-arising of evil, unwholesome states that have not yet arisen. He makes an effort, applies his energy, and lays hold of and exerts his mind to this end. This, monks, is called the effort to restrain. And of what sort, monks, is the effort to abandon? Here, a monk generates intention for the abandoning of evil, unwholesome states that have arisen. He makes an effort, applies his energy, he lays hold of and exerts his mind to this end. This is called the effort to abandon. And of what sort, monks, is the effort to make arise? Here, he generates intention for the arising of wholesome states, not yet arisen. He makes an effort, applies his energy, he lays hold of, and exerts his mind to this end. This is called the effort to make arise. And of what sort, monks, is the effort to preserve? Here, a monk generates intention for the establishing, for the non-confusion, for the more existence, for the increase, cultivation, and fulfillment of wholesome states that have arisen. He makes an effort, applies his energy, he lays hold of, and exerts his mind to this end. This is called the effort to preserve. So these, monks, are the four efforts. So here the Buddha is describing right effort from the Eightfold Path using slightly different language than what he does in the Eightfold Path. He describes it in different ways because it's a rising right effort that is going to allow you to be dedicated, determined, and diligent, like what we've been discussing in the previous chapters. So in order to apply that effort, in order to eliminate certain unwholesome qualities and arise wholesome qualities, you need to have mindfulness, yes, to be aware of the mind, but you also need to apply right effort to either restrain the mind, which is the language the Buddha is talking about here, where certain unwholesome qualities that are not currently in the mind, you need to prevent those from ever coming into the mind. So you need to restrain the mind and not allow any unwholesome qualities to come into the mind that are not currently there. A good example of that is something like killing a human being. You probably have no interest in killing a human being at this point, and you know if you did, that would be unwise. So you would like to prevent that from ever coming into the mind. That's the first aspect of right effort. Not just killing a human being, that's just one example, but any unwholesome quality that is currently not in your mind. You would like to restrain the mind and prevent that from ever coming into the mind. And then there's certain unwholesome qualities that are currently in your mind. If the mind is unenlightened, there's certain unwholesome qualities that exist there, and you would like to abandon them. You would like to eliminate them from the mind. And that's going to require right effort, where you apply the effort to eliminate those unwholesome qualities. Of course, you're going to need mindfulness or awareness of mind to be able to know that those unwholesome qualities are there and they're arising. But then you apply the effort to abandon those when you see that they have arisen in the mind. An example of this might be if you're in a current relationship with a partner and you have a craving to go outside your relationship and maybe have sex with another partner. You know this is going to cause harm to your partner, it's going to cause harm to you and to other people who are involved in this activity. It's going to cause harm to anybody that's involved. So if you notice that that's arising, you would like to abandon that or eliminate it from the mind because it's an unwholesome quality. Or something like anger or hatred. If you see frustration arising in the mind, you would like to abandon that, apply the effort to eliminate it from the mind. The third aspect of right effort, the Buddha here is using the language of make arise, or this is to bring a wholesome quality into the mind. If there's a certain wholesome quality, say like generosity or maybe compassion that you don't currently have in your mind right now, that you know that this is part of the path to enlightenment and you're going to need this quality of mind in order to get to enlightenment, you would like to apply the effort to make this arise or bring this into the mind, produce this wholesome quality. And there's multiple wholesome qualities that you're going to learn that need to be produced in the mind as part of your journey to enlightenment. And then there's certain wholesome qualities that you currently have in your mind. And if you have those certain qualities, you would like to preserve those qualities. You would like to develop them, cultivate them, not allow them to fade, bring them to full growth and full perfection of development. This is the fourth aspect of right effort, that where you see any particular wholesome quality, you continue to support that, encourage it, not allow it to fade. So here the Buddha is just using different language than what he uses in the Eightfold Path to help people understand what it is that you need to do with right effort. Let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 23 of volume 9, which is titled The Four Efforts, First Discourse. All right, I'm not noticing any questions anywhere, so let's move to the next chapter, which is chapter 24. This one is titled The Four Efforts, Second Discourse. Here you're going to get some more illuminating language that is explaining those same things, but adding some more content to help you further understand this right effort. Monks, there are these four efforts. What for? The effort to restrain, the effort to abandon, the effort to make arise, and the effort to watch over. And of what sort, monks, is the effort to restrain? Here, having seen a form with the eye, a monk is not entranced and does not grasp its general features or its details. Since if he left the eye faculty unrestrained, evil, unwholesome states of craving and aversion might invade him. He practices restraint over it. He guards the eye sense space. He undertakes the restraint of the eye sense space. Having heard a sound with the ear, having smelled an odor with the nose, having tasted a flavor with the tongue, having touched a physical object with the body, having recognized a mental object with the mind, a monk is not entranced and does not grasp its general features or its details. Since if he left the eye sense space unrestrained, evil, unwholesome states of craving and aversion might invade him. He practices restraint over it. He guards the eye sense space. He undertakes the restraint of the eye sense space, wins the restraint thereof. Similar discourses are spoken in the case of the ear sense space, the nose sense space, the tongue sense space, the body sense space, the mind sense space. This, monks, is called the effort to restrain. And of what sort, monks, is the effort to abandon? Here, a monk does not welcome sensual thought that has arisen. So also with regard to harmful and cruel thought that have arisen. He does not welcome evil, unwholesome states that arise from time to time, but abandons it, expels it, makes an end of it. He drives them out of renewed existence. This, monks, is called the effort to abandon. And of what sort, monks, is the effort to make arise? Here, a monk makes to arise the limb of wisdom, that is mindfulness, the limb of wisdom, that is investigation of the teachings, the limb of wisdom, that is energy, the limb of wisdom, that is joy, the limb of wisdom, that is tranquility, the limb of wisdom, that is concentration, the limb of wisdom, that is equanimity, that is based on seclusion, on freedom from strong feelings, on elimination, that ends in surrender of the mind. This, monks, is called the effort to make arise. And of what sort, monks, is the effort to watch over? Here, a monk watches over the favorable concentration mark, the idea of the skeleton, the idea of the worm-eaten corpse, of the discolored corpse, the cracked open corpse, the idea of the initiated corpse. This is called the effort to watch over. These, then, monks, are the 4 efforts. Okay, so here we're getting more details from the Buddha on applying the 4 efforts to eliminate central desire. So this first one, where he's talking about restraining the mind, this is preventing any unwholesome states from arising. This is what he describes in other teachings. But here, he's going into detail as it relates to central desire, that as you experience any contact through the 6 sense bases, that now you restrain the mind. You don't allow this craving and aversion to come into the mind. The craving is the longing, yearning, and chasing after something. And if you get agreeable contact, you get those pleasant feelings. What aversion is that when you have craving in the mind, you're going to see things as agreeable and disagreeable. And then the disagreeable, you're going to want to push it away. That if you experience contact through the eyes that is disagreeable to you, this aversion is to push it away, thinking that that's going to solve the problem, but it doesn't. So the mind, craving pleasant feelings, will chase after things, and then if it gets those pleasant feelings. But if it doesn't get what it wants, it gets disagreeable contact, then it will try to push the person or push the situation out of the way, and this is aversion. Eventually, by the time you eliminate craving, you won't have agreeable and disagreeable contact. It'll just be contact. There's just something that you're experiencing, and you understand that all these things are impermanent, and you won't have things that are agreeable to you or disagreeable to you. It's just contact. You'll have things that you prefer, like certain foods or certain experiences that you prefer, but your mind won't be shaken up when you experience something that is what you don't necessarily prefer. You can still maintain your contentedness and your joy. And the way that you do that is eliminating the craving. As long as there's craving, there's going to be agreeable things and there's going to be disagreeable things. And you can get pleasant feelings when you have agreeable contact, and you'll get painful feelings when you have disagreeable contact. And then that's where the aversion comes in. So by restraining the mind, you can ensure that this isn't occurring. And more, you can eliminate the cravings that are producing it. Then there's the abandoning here, where the Buddha is saying, okay, that if there's any kind of central thought, harmful thought, or cruel thought, that you abandon that if it's come to the mind. This is part of right intention. If you think about right intention from the Eightfold Path, there's 3 aspects of it. There's the intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, and the intention of harmlessness. These are those 3 intentions, and that you need to apply the right effort to cultivate those wholesome intentions of renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness. Here the Buddha is saying, okay, if a central thought arises, or if a harmful thought arises, or a cruel thought arises, that you apply effort to eliminate it and abandon it from the mind. Then he's talking about making wholesome qualities to arise in the mind. This is that 3rd aspect of right effort, where you apply effort to bring in wholesome qualities into the mind. Some of the wholesome qualities that you'll need to cultivate are called the 7 factors of enlightenment. These are qualities of mind to fine-tune the mind. The first one is mindfulness, having that awareness of mind. The second one is the interest and willingness to investigate the teachings. The third one is energy. Energy is enthusiasm, motivation, the willingness to do something. And then the fourth one is joy. This is unconditioned gladness in the mind. So these are the first 4. And then with that mindfulness, what you're doing is you're noticing if the mind is sluggish or lethargic. And if you are aware that the mind is sluggish and lethargic with your mindfulness, you then practice investigation, energy, and joy to uplift the mind and fine tune it and bring it to the middle. But where you notice with mindfulness that the mind is excited or elated, you then practice the enlightenment factors of tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. These are the fifth, sixth, and seventh factors of enlightenment. We call them factors of enlightenment, but they're not to determine if you are enlightened or aren't enlightened. They are to fine-tune the mind, so that when you notice that the mind is sluggish or lethargic or dull, you can uplift the mind with the investigation, energy, and joy. But where you notice that the mind is excited, you can calm it down and bring it to the middle with the tranquility, the calmness. Then you can have this concentration or this focus, this singleness of mind. And then the equanimity is the evenness of temper. And this is what's going to bring the mind into the calm state out of that excited state. And you're going to need to apply the effort to do this. Then this fourth aspect that the Buddha is describing here about watching over the mind, here this is where any wholesome qualities that are in the mind, you support them, encourage them, not allowing them to fade. Here, I don't know 100% what the Buddha is referring to here, other than what is practiced during the lifetime of the Buddha, and some people practice it now, is that when you're having sensual desire, particularly if you're having desire for sexual contact, one of the ways to eliminate this is to observe a skeleton or a corpse. You can observe the corpse in its condition, and here the Buddha is sharing these different types of corpses, and that this will help you to not associate the physical body with something that is pleasurable. And not only do you, during the lifetime of the Buddha, do you see these corpses, but you actually smell them as well. So it kind of turns the mind away from being interested to have sexual contact. Because if somebody had their skin ripped off, or all kinds of sores, or here you can see like worms eating a dead corpse, or a discolored corpse, or cracked open corpse, if you see this, you can cultivate the mind to eliminate sensual desire where you're no longer interested in having sex, if that's what you would like to take your practice to in order to ultimately eliminate sensual desire. Because it's only because we do all kinds of interesting things with our hair, our clothes, our makeup, our jewelry, our muscles, our body tone, different things that we do, certain scents like perfumes and colognes, that we try to make the body as attractive as possible so somebody will be interested in having sex. But if you look at the body in its natural state with pus and mucus and saliva and feces and urine and things like this, you can start to kind of turn away from seeing the body as being a pleasurable thing that you would like to have sex with. And this is something that you may or may not be interested in doing right now. It just depends on what you're doing in your practice, and maybe what your age is, or where you're at in life. Some people might have already experienced a certain amount of sexual contact. Maybe they've had a family or something like this, and now they're looking to eliminate sexual contact. Some people may be younger and maybe haven't done those things yet, and maybe they're interested in doing those things before they eliminate sexual contact. Or somebody could be younger and decide that they would like to eliminate sexual contact. And this is one of the ways to do that, is through actually observing a dead corpse. Because it's not so common to be able to observe a dead corpse nowadays, we do certain things to protect society from any kind of disease or illness from a dead body, that they're not as readily accessible as they were during the lifetime of the Buddha. Nowadays, what we tend to use is images or photographs of a dead corpse, and you can get these on the internet, and you can get these other places where you can look at these pictures in order to accomplish the same thing. So let me know if you guys have any questions on this. You can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and then I'll be able to answer your questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to move on to the next chapter. The next chapter is chapter 25. This one, oh, Max has a hand up. Go ahead, Max. Your mute's still on.
Oh, sorry. I can read this chapter if you would like, sir.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
The ending of the round. On seeing a form with the eye, he does not crave after it if it is pleasing. He is not averse to it if it is unpleasing. On hearing a sound with the ear, he does not crave after it if it is pleasing. He is not averse to it if it is unpleasing. On smelling an odor with the nose, he does not crave after it if it is pleasing. He is not averse to it if it is unpleasing. On tasting a flavor with the tongue, he does not crave after it if it is pleasing. He is not averse to it if it is unpleasing. On touching a physical object with the body, he does not crave after it if it is pleasing. He is not averse to it if it is unpleasing. On recognizing a mental object with the mind, he does not crave after it if it is pleasing. He is not averse to it if it is unpleasing. He resides with mindfulness of the body established with an immeasurable mind, and he understands as it actually is the liberation of mind and liberation by wisdom, wherein those evil, unwholesome states are eliminated without remainder. Having thus abandoned favoring and opposing whatever feeling he feels, whether pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, he does not seek excitement in that feeling, welcome it, or remain holding to it. As he does not do so, excitement in feelings is eliminated in him. With the elimination of his excitement comes elimination of clinging. With the elimination of clinging, elimination of existence. With elimination of existence, elimination of birth. With elimination of birth, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair are eliminated. Such is the elimination of this whole mass of discontentedness.
Okay, thanks, Max. So here, the title of this, The Ending of the Round, this is referring to is the ending of the cycle of rebirth, where an individual is just going around and around and around and around and being reborn over and over and over again. This is what one is doing in terms of individual lives, but this is also what is occurring when there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind. If you observe your mind, that if it becomes obsessed with a certain craving, it can almost be like going around and around and around and around, like a hamster on a wheel, just spinning and spinning and spinning around and around and around. If you ever laid awake at night and just worrying about something or being obsessed about something over and over and over again, or if you saw something at a store or any other thing that the mind was craving and longing after, you might have felt this obsession where the mind is just longing and yearning. So here the Buddha is explaining how the sixth sense space is that you can have this craving where the mind is craving something pleasing. But if you're looking to end this cycle of rebirth and end this round and around and around and around where the mind is continually doing this, then you do not crave after something that is pleasing. You don't chase and chase and chase after it. And then when you experience something that's unpleasing, you're not averse to it. You don't push it away, right? So that you can train your mind this way through all the six sense bases. And you'll notice that the mind is doing this in the unenlightened state, whether it's through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, or the mind itself. It's either craving and chasing something, or it's pushing something away because it doesn't like it. And you would like to no longer allow the mind to do that, that you would like to retrain the mind to be able to understand that all these things are impermanent. And the way that you do that is what the Buddha describes here, is that you reside with mindfulness of the body established. This is the first foundation of mindfulness, being aware of those bodily sensations. Because if you have craving in the mind and you have contact through the sense bases, there's going to be a bodily sensation that's occurring that if you're going to get a pleasant feeling, there's going to be this bodily sensation associated with this pleasant feeling that's about to arise. Or if you're going to get a painful feeling, there's going to be some bodily sensation associated with that. And if you're not aware of those right now, you can train the mind through breathing mindfulness meditation to clue into this more and more, and then pay attention to it in daily life so that you can clue into it more and more. So this is how you restrain the mind and eliminate your cravings, is you need to develop the mindfulness to be aware of the bodily sensations, so that those bodily sensations are essentially like an early warning system alerting you that your mind is about to become discontent. That's how you actually get to liberation. If you develop that ability more and more closely, you'll be able to restrain the mind and eliminate your cravings. So that by the time you get closer and closer to enlightenment, there's no longer this favoring and opposing, that you've abandoned that. That by the time you get closer and closer to enlightenment, you don't see things as agreeable and disagreeable, or that you favor it or you oppose it. It's just what is. It's just contact through the six sense bases, and you don't necessarily favor it or oppose it. You don't have agreeable contact or disagreeable contact. It's just contact. And now, if that feeling arises, that conditioned feeling, that you don't remain holding on to it. Because as long as you keep remaining to hold on to it, now this conditioned feeling is going to produce discontentedness. That is the discontentedness, that if you experience a conditioned pleasant feeling, okay, you might enjoy that for a period of time, but now the mind's going to move to this conditioned painful feeling, where now the mind's sad or frustrated or angry. So you need to understand that this conditional excitement is ultimately dissatisfying and displeasing, because it's only temporary. And by you eliminating the conditionality of these feelings, you can get to the point where you have permanent joy. And having done so, the mind will be enlightened, and not only will you experience permanent peace and joy for the rest of this life, but you won't experience rebirth coming back into the world over and over again. And this is the last part here of dependent origination, which is the Buddha's highest, most ultimate teaching. You can find this in its totality in Volume 5, Chapter 14. You can see the words of the Buddha, and you can see my words as well to help you further understand it. So Volume 5, Chapter 14 is where you'll understand dependent origination, because you're going to need that. In order to get to even the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to need to know dependent origination. So here the Buddha is just giving you the last part of it, that as you eliminate this craving and clinging, now you eliminate existence, you eliminate birth, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. This is the way to end the constant rebirth, is to eliminate the craving, the longing, the yearning. That's the fuel that causes rebirth. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So we'll move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 26. This one is titled Mindfulness Directed to the Body, a Strong Post for Mind. Here, the first one, there's two different sections here. I'll read one and I'll explain it, and then I'll read the other one and explain it to you. One dwells without having set up mindfulness of the body. Suppose, monks, a man would catch 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds, and tie them by a strong rope. He would catch a snake, a crocodile, a bird, a dog, a jackal, and a monkey, and tie each by a strong rope. Having done so, he would tie the ropes together with a knot in the middle and release them. Then those 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds would each pull in the direction of its own feeding ground and domain. The snake would pull one way, thinking, "Let me enter an ant hill." The crocodile would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter the water." The bird would pull another way, thinking, "Let me fly up into the sky." The dog would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter a village." The jackal would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter a charnel ground." The monkey would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter a forest." Now, when these 6 animals become worn out and fatigued, they would be dominated by the one among them that was strongest. They would submit to it and come under its control. So too, monks, when a monk has not developed and cultivated mindfulness directed to the body, the eye pulls in the direction of agreeable forms, and disagreeable forms are repulsive. The ear pulls in the direction of agreeable sounds, and disagreeable sounds are repulsive. The nose pulls in the direction of agreeable odors, and disagreeable odors are repulsive. The tongue pulls in the direction of agreeable flavors, and disagreeable flavors are repulsive. The body pulls in the direction of agreeable physical objects, and disagreeable physical objects are repulsive. The mind pulls in the direction of agreeable mental objects, and disagreeable mental objects are repulsive. It is in such a way that there is non-restraint. Okay, so let me explain this to you before we move on to the next one. Here, what the Buddha is explaining is someone who hasn't developed mindfulness of the body, those bodily sensations. And he's describing the story of 6 individual animals that have a rope essentially around their neck. And then an individual ties these 6 animals together. These individual ropes are tied together by a knot in the middle. And now all these 6 animals are going to pull in opposite directions. And they're eventually going to all get tired, but whichever one is strongest, that animal is going to win out, and now it's going to control all the others. And the Buddha is explaining that this is the exact same thing that's occurring with your 6 sense bases, that if you don't have mindfulness of the body, that your eyes are pulling in one direction, your ears are pulling in one direction, your nose, your tongue, the body, and the mind, they're all pulling in all these different directions. And whichever one is pulling the strongest, that's the one that's going to win out. So let me give you an example. Say that you have a certain longing and yearning for sexual contact, and now you're in a certain environment, like a public space, like a mall or something like this, and you see a handsome man or a beautiful woman, and your eyes are like, oh wow, that's so amazing, and your eyes start pulling in that direction. Or say you smell a certain odor of perfume or cologne, and now your nose is pulling in that direction towards this certain odor, this certain perfume. So that's what's occurring because you don't have a strong post and strong pillar, that the mind is undisciplined, it's untrained, it can be pulled around by your sense bases. And it's not just with attractive people, of course, it can be for money or wealth or material objects or anything like this. I just give you this example because it's one that some people can relate to. So now the Buddha is going to explain the same story, but with an individual who's cultivated mindfulness of the body. So this one's titled, One Resides Having Set Up Mindfulness of the Body. Suppose, monks, a man would catch 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds, and tie them by a strong rope. He would catch a snake, a crocodile, a bird, a dog, a jackal, and a monkey, and tie each by a strong rope. Having done so, he would bind them to a strong post or pillar. Then those 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds would each pull in the direction of its own feeding ground and domain. The snake would pull one way, thinking, let me enter an anthill. The crocodile would pull another way, thinking, let me enter the water. The bird would pull another way, thinking, let me fly up into the sky. The dog would pull another way, thinking, let me enter a village. The jackal would pull another way, thinking, let me enter a charnel ground. The monkey would pull another way, thinking, let me enter a forest. Now, when these 6 animals become worn out and fatigued, they would stand close to that post or pillar. They would sit down there. They would lie down there. So too, monks, when a monk has developed and cultivated mindfulness directed to the body, the eye does not pull in the direction of agreeable forms, nor are disagreeable forms repulsive. The ear does not pull in the direction of agreeable sounds, nor are disagreeable sounds repulsive. The nose does not pull in the direction of agreeable odors, nor are disagreeable odors repulsive. The tongue does not pull in the direction of agreeable flavors, nor are disagreeable flavors repulsive. The body does not pull in the direction of agreeable physical objects, nor are disagreeable physical objects repulsive. The mind does not pull in the direction of agreeable mental objects, nor are disagreeable mental objects repulsive. It is in such a way that there is restraint. A strong post or pillar, this, monks, is a designation for mindfulness directed to the body. Therefore, monks, you should train yourselves thus. We will develop and cultivate mindfulness directed to the body, make it our vehicle, make it our basis, stabilize it, exercise ourselves in it, and fully perfect it. Thus should you train yourselves. So this is a whole different scenario that the Buddha is explaining. This is somebody who's cultivated mindfulness of the body, being aware of those bodily sensations that are occurring prior to the mind becoming discontent. because when there's craving in the mind and you have contact through the six sense bases, there's going to be some bodily sensation before you get a conditioned pleasant feeling and before the conditioned painful feelings, or the neither painful nor pleasant feelings. And if you can observe that bodily sensation and cut off and let go of that sensation, now you can protect the mind and not allow it to get that conditioned feeling, essentially rewiring the mind, not allowing it to have conditioned feelings, so you can get to this unconditioned mental qualities of peace and joy. So he describes this as these animals that are pulling in these different directions, that they've now been tied to a post or a pillar. So now they pull and pull and pull. And whenever they pull, they get to the end of that rope and they get yanked back, because there's a post and pillar that they're tied to. Before, they were tied to each other, so they were being pulled all over the place, and whichever one was stronger would just keep pulling in that direction. But now the Buddha is describing that there's this post or pillar in the ground, so when they pull and pull and pull, they keep getting yanked back and yanked back and yanked back. Eventually they're going to get tired, they're going to get fatigued, and when they get tired and fatigued, they're just going to sit by that post or pillar. They're not going to be able to continue to pull, because they realize, aha, I can't pull because I'm attached to this post and pillar. So if your mind is longing, yearning through these sense bases, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind, and you pull it back and pull it back and pull it back, and you keep restraining it, eventually your mind's going to get fatigued, and it's going to get to the point where it realizes it can't keep continuing to long and yearn, because every time it does, you keep yanking it back and yanking it back and pulling it back, and then it's just going to sit down and be calm and steady and stable in the enlightened mental state, because you've eliminated cravings, desires, attachments. So by restraining the mind in this way, that's what's going to ultimately help you eliminate the craving, desire, attachment. You're going to need the breathing mindfulness meditation and the generosity to build the qualities to be able to do that. But then in daily life, as you're observing the mind and you're noticing that the mind is pulling through these sense bases, that's when you pull back and pull back and pull back. You exercise this, you fully perfect it so that the mind can be fully trained to be able to do this. And this is how you ultimately can gain control and discipline of the mind. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can electronically raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Max, I see you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. There's a question in Zoom. It says, "Teacher, could you please give examples about the quote-unquote pillar is one's living principle?"
So the pillar is your mindfulness of the bodily sensations. It's not what you're describing here. This is, as you're doing breathing mindfulness meditation, you're focused on the breath. And now when the mind moves off the breath, you cut that off and you bring it back to the breath. So in meditation, your breath is the post or pillar that you're keeping the mind fixated on. And then when it moves off, you cut that off and you bring it back to the breath. So in meditation, it's your breath. But then in daily life, where you see the mind longing, yearning, and it's longing through these sense bases, you cut that off and you bring the mind back to the present moment. You don't allow it to continue to long and yearn and chase. You might feel the mind pulling towards the objects of its affection. And where you notice that with your mindfulness, that's what you cut off and bring the mind back. And if you can do that internally, great. But sometimes what you need to do is you need to redirect the mind. So if we keep with this example of being in a mall and seeing a handsome man or a beautiful woman, say you're walking behind this person and your mind is longing and yearning and you're checking out every last little feature of their body, what you might do to redirect the mind is like duck into a store, like go into a store, spend 3-5 minutes looking around, and then when you come out, you're in new traffic and new people are around. Or you might move to another direction. Or you might turn around and walk the other direction. You're going to need to do this for a period of time with all the different cravings. So if you're in a coffee shop or you walk past a coffee shop and you feel your mind longing and yearning for the coffee shop, you might need to cross the street and get away from that odor so that that is no longer pulling the mind towards the coffee shop. Whatever cravings, desires, attachments that you're noticing, you're going to need to be able to be observant when the mind is longing, yearning for these things, and cut it off. And if you can be aware of the bodily sensations, that's the mind getting ready to experience a feeling that is either pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. These are the conditioned feelings. And if you can cut it off as a bodily sensation, that's ideal. But sometimes you can even be observant of it, even like before that. You can just get the slightest little whiff of the coffee, for example, walking down the street, and you're like, nope, 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 I'm not going to let the mind do that. And then you just completely switch to the other side of the street. And you only need to do this for a period of time until you've eliminated that particular craving. You won't need to always do that. But while your mind is sensitive and you still got that craving in there and you're working to extinguish it, you're going to need to actively restrain the mind like this in certain situations. Okay, so I don't see any other questions. All right, Sophia, I see you got it. You're welcome. Pleased to help you. All right, so let's move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 27. Chapter 27 is titled The Simile of the Tortoise. This is going to also help you understand the 6 sense bases. Monks, in the past a tortoise was searching for food along the bank of a river one evening. On that same evening, a jackal was also searching for food along the bank of that same river. When the tortoise saw the jackal in the distance, searching for food, it drew its limbs and neck inside its shell and passed the time keeping still and silent. The jackal had also seen the tortoise in the distance searching for food, so he approached and waited close by, thinking, when this tortoise extends one or another of its limbs or its neck, I will grab it right on the spot, pull it out and eat it. But because the tortoise did not extend any of its limbs or its neck, the jackal, failing to gain access to it, lost interest in it and departed. So too, monks, Mara, the evil one, is constantly and continually waiting close by you, thinking, perhaps I will gain access to him through the eye, or through the ear, or through the nose, or through the tongue, or through the body, or through the mind. Therefore, monks, reside guarding the doors of the 6 sense bases, having seen a form with the eye, having heard a sound with the ear, having smelt an odor with the nose, having tasted a flavor with the tongue, having touched a physical object with the body, having recognized a mental object with the mind. Do not grasp at its signs and features. Since, if you leave the eye sense base unguarded, the ear sense base unguarded, the nose sense base unguarded, the tongue sense base unguarded, the body sense base unguarded, the mind sense base unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of craving and displeasure might invade you. Practice the way of its restraint. Guard the eye sense base, the ear sense base, the nose sense base, the tongue sense base, the body sense base, the mind sense base. Undertake the restraint of the eye sense base, the ear sense base, the nose sense base, the tongue sense base, the body sense base, and the mind sense base. When, monks, you reside guarding the doors of the 6 sense bases, Mara, the evil one, failing to gain access to you, will lose interest in you and depart, just as the jackal departed from the tortoise. Drawing in the mind's thoughts, as a tortoise draws its limbs into its shell, independent, not harassing others, fully extinguished, a monk would not blame anyone. So this story of the tortoise is reminding you of what a tortoise does in order to protect itself, that it draws in its limbs. And a tortoise has 6 individual limbs. It has its neck, it has its tail, and then its 4 legs. So it represents the 6 sense bases. And if you extend your limbs, then it's easy for the jackal to rip the turtle out of the shell and eat it. And it's the same thing is true about this being called Mara. This being that the Buddha is referring to is a formless being that is interested in creating calamity in the world. And this being is going to try to tempt you and pull you in one direction or another. And the way that it does that is through various sensual pleasures that the mind might be longing and yearning for. So as you long and yearn through your sense spaces, Mara can easily gain access to you, and your mind can go up and down and up and down. You can be led towards unwholesome mental states. It's still your decisions that you're making, but Mara can easily tempt you when there's central desire in the mind. But if you cut off and eliminate the central desire, the longing and yearning, and you get to a point where you don't have central desire, Mara can't tempt you any longer. In fact, once you get to the first jhana, the mind has distanced itself from certain central desires, and you have cultivated enough training and wisdom in the mind that Mara can't really be effective anymore. But as long as you have central desire, the mind can do that. So what you do is you practice mindfulness. That's the guard that guards over the mind. When the Buddha is talking about here reside guarding the 6 sense bases, it's the mindfulness that's allowing you to do that, the awareness of the mind. If you're not cultivating that in breathing mindfulness meditation, then you're not going to be able to practice it in daily life. And if you can't practice mindfulness in daily life, you're not going to have concentration and you're not going to be able to access wisdom. You're going to be very easily tempted by any kind of central desire. So you would like to draw in your limbs. So just keeping with this same example of walking in the mall, maybe there's beautiful women or handsome men. You would not like to extend your neck and long and yearn and be looking all over the place for this handsome man or beautiful woman. You would like to restrain the mind and reside guarding the doorways, that when you walking in this space, that you know that you're going to be seeing a bunch of handsome men and beautiful women and smelling certain things. Don't allow the mind to pull and long and yearn in this environment. And of course, these environments are designed to elicit your craving. That's what marketing is all about, is to try to get you to purchase things based on your craving. So there's going to be certain window displays, there's going to be certain scents, there's going to be certain pictures, maybe music and things like this, different colors, to try to excite your craving so that you will buy things in a place like a mall, for example. So guard your mind, just like the tortoise is draw in the limbs. Don't allow your mind to be extended out through your 6 sense bases. Any questions on this chapter? All right, I'm not seeing any questions here, so I'm just going to move on to the next one, which is chapter 28. Here, this one is titled Sense Control Leads to Liberating Wisdom and Insight. Looks like Max would like to read this. Go ahead, Max.
Sorry. I missed a question on Facebook.
Okay.
Mayuli asks, asks, throughout the day, my mind constantly wanders of the tasks at hand. My head gets tense and tight. Is this the bodily sensations that I need to cut off by bringing the mind back to the task at hand?
Yes, exactly, Mayuli. When you're noticing those bodily sensations, that's because of the craving, the longing, the yearning, wanting to hurry up and get all your tasks done. And you need to realize that you can just do one thing at a time. And even though you might have the idea of doing 10 or 20 things in a day, you're not going to be able to do that. And if it helps you, you can actually write down all the tasks. It doesn't mean you're going to complete them all in one day, but sometimes just getting them out of the mind and onto a piece of paper, or maybe into your phone as a list in the notes section of your phone. Sometimes just getting them out and written down can allow the mind to be at ease, so that you're not letting it sit there and cycle and be obsessive. So yes, those bodily sensations is what you're looking to cut off and come back to the present moment where you're just addressing the task at hand. And wherever you notice that the mind is drifting or wandering or longing or yearning, you would like to do that. And if it's a bunch of tasks that you have that your mind feels like it wants to hurry up and complete, that's the craving, desire, attachment. And oftentimes writing them down will actually help you. All right, so I guess I'll go ahead and read this chapter then. So this is chapter 28. It's titled Sense Control Leads to Liberating Wisdom and Insight. Oh, Max has got his hand up again. Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, I can read this one.
Sure, go ahead.
Sense control leads to liberating wisdom and insight. Monks, imagine a tree with thriving branches and leaves. Its buds, bark, sapwood, and heart come to maturity. Even so, monks, when sense control exists, virtue, moral conduct, naturally thrives in him. thriving in sense control. When there is virtue, concentration naturally thrives in him. When concentration, true wisdom and insight. When true wisdom and insight, abandoning and freedom from strong feelings. When abandoning and freedom from strong feelings, liberating wisdom and insight naturally thrive in him.
Okay, thank you, Max. So here, the Buddha is a master at showing this cause and effect, or this action and result, this natural law of Gama, this causality. And here he's showing you that when you develop this control of the sense spaces, that it's going to lead to this naturally developing this virtuous moral conduct. Because when your mind's longing and yearning through your sense bases, you're going to chase some unwholesome things. And as you're chasing and chasing and chasing, your moral conduct is not going to always be wise. You're going to sometimes do things like lying, for example, or some people might steal or have sexual misconduct or some of these other things. So when you start restraining the mind and not allowing it to long and yearn through the sense bases, you'll notice this natural moral conduct that kind of thrives inside. And you learn that through things like the Eightfold Path and the Five Precepts and things of that nature. So by training the mind through the sense bases, you're going to notice that there's more moral conduct, there's more concentration. Because as long as there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind, that pollution is in there, you will have a muddled mind. You'll lack concentration. You'll lack memory. But when you eliminate the cravings, desires, attachments, where the mind is longing through the sense spaces and you're getting rid of that pollution, not only will you notice more moral conduct and this virtuous moral conduct arising, but you'll notice more concentration, focus, clarity of mind, and deeper memory. And when you have that concentration, in order to get there, it's also cultivating this true wisdom and insight. You're going to need to know the true teachings to have been able to get there. That when you keep the mind calm, there's mindfulness or awareness of mind. When there's mindfulness, awareness of mind, there's concentration or clarity of mind. And now you can access wisdom, that you can make wise decisions in your day-to-day life. When you have this true wisdom and insight of the path to enlightenment, then you can abandon the strong feelings, those discontent feelings. And then having abandoned those strong feelings, you'll naturally have this wisdom about how to liberate the mind and get it to this enlightened mental state, because you have freedom from these strong feelings. The mind is actually liberated and enlightened, so you will have this wisdom of how to actually do that because you've actually done it. So what questions do you have on this chapter? Okay, we're not seeing any questions here. So let's go to the next one, which is chapter 29. Again, the Buddha is going to show you some cause and effect or causality here around negligence and around diligence. This one is titled, "Without restraint, one dwells negligently. With restraint, one resides diligently. And how, monks, does one dwell negligently? If one dwells without restraint over the eye sense space, the mind is soiled among forms recognizable by the eye. If the mind is soiled, there is no gladness. When there is no gladness, there is no joy. When there is no joy, there is no tranquility or calmness. When there is no tranquility, one dwells in discontentedness. The mind of one who is discontent does not become concentrated. When the mind is not concentrated, experiences do not become easily recognizable or clear in the mind. Because experiences do not become easily recognizable or clear in the mind, one is considered as one who dwells negligently. Similar discourses are spoken in the case of the ear sense base, the nose sense base, the tongue sense base, the body sense base, and the mind sense base. It is in such a way, monks, that one dwells negligently. And how, monks, does one reside diligently? If one resides with restraint over the eye sense base, the mind is not soiled among forms recognizable by the eye. If the mind is not soiled, gladness is born. When one is gladdened, joy is born. When the mind is uplifted by joy, the body becomes tranquil or calm. One tranquil in body experiences contentedness. The mind of one who is content becomes concentrated. When the mind is concentrated, experiences become easily recognizable or clear in the mind. Because experiences become easily recognizable or clear in the mind, one is considered as one who resides diligently. Similar discourses are spoken in the case of the ear sense base, the nose sense base, the tongue sense base, the body sense base, and the mind sense base. It is in such a way, monks, that one resides diligently. So in order to get to enlightenment, an individual is going to need to eliminate complacency. They're going to need to eliminate this negligence of just allowing the mind to pull and long and yearn in all these different directions through the sense bases. You're going to need to arise this diligence, this determination, and this dedication. And it's going to need to be consistent and long term. It's not just a 1 week, 1 month, or 1 year thing. You're going to need to be diligent long term over the course of multiple years in order to be committed enough to meditate, to read books, to come to classes, but also to observe the mind when you're in daily life and notice when it's longing and yearning and to be able to pull it back. Because if the mind is negligent and allows the mind to be unrestrained, then the mind is soiled. That's what the Buddha is describing here, that the mind is going to be soiled. When the mind is soiled, you're not going to be experiencing gladness, because that gladness is the unconditioned gladness, where in the case of sensual desire, you can only experience conditioned pleasant feelings when you get what you want. So that means you're limited in the amount of pleasure that you can experience, because you can only experience pleasure when the conditions are met that you want. And then when those conditions aren't met, your mind's going to end up in the painful feeling. So as long as you're negligent and your mind is soiled, there's not going to be continuous and ongoing gladness. When there's not gladness, there's not this unconditioned joy. When there's no unconditioned joy, there's no tranquility. When there's no tranquility, then the mind dwells in this discontentedness, these conditioned feelings, that the mind goes up into conditioned pleasant feelings, down into the painful feelings, and then there's those neither painful nor pleasant feelings. When the mind is uncalm and shaken up, then the mind can't be concentrated. When the mind is not concentrated, then it's not experiencing this clarity of mind that I talk about. Then when you're not experiencing the clarity of mind, then your mind is not clear, so therefore you're negligent. The mind is continuing to be negligent. But when you reside diligent, you can actually restrain the mind, no longer allowing it long and yearn through these sense spaces. And that's where you can clean up the mind and you can purify it, so that by it not being soiled, then gladness is born in the mind. You can start experiencing this unconditioned gladness and joy that arises in the mind. The mind can be uplifted by this joy, and the body becomes tranquil. Because when the mind is tranquil, when it's nice and calm, then the body will be calm. If you experience tension in your neck or your jaw or across your shoulders or any other parts of your body, this is all coming from the mind. That the mind, if it's discontent and it's soiled with these sensual desire, you're going to be chasing after things, and you can only get pleasure if you get what you want. So in some situations, you're not going to get what you want. So you're going to have this stress and this anxiety and other discontent feelings in the mind, and this is going to be experienced in the body. But when the mind is tranquil, the body can be tranquil. So when you uplift the mind with this unconditioned joy, you'll notice that the mind in the body will become tranquil and calm. When the body is experiencing that tranquility, then the mind can be content, because you're not experiencing these aches and pains all over the body, right? And then when there's this contentedness in the mind can be concentrated. And this is going to help you to perform daily tasks in your life, that you have more concentration and focus and clarity of mind. And then you'll be able to function with diligence, that you're dedicated to applying effort and energy to train the mind. So this is going to require long-term, sustained dedication, determination, and diligence. And you gradually learn, you gradually reflect on those teachings and gradually practice them, and then you gradually experience progress more and more as you're eliminating the pollution of the mind. And that needs diligence in order to experience that. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? You can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So we'll move on to the last one for today, which is chapter 30. This one is titled, Diligence is Declared to be the Chief. Monks, whatever beings there are, whether those without feet or those with 2 feet, or those with 4 feet, or those with many feet, whether consisting of form or formless, whether insightful, non-insightful, or neither insightful nor non-insightful, the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, is declared to be the chief among them. So too, whatever wholesome states there are, they are all rooted in diligence, merge upon diligence, and diligence is declared to be the chief among them. When a monk is diligent, it is to be predicted that he will develop and cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path. The Tathagata also made analogies of diligence being chief with the following: elephant's footprint being the chief among footprints of all living beings, roof peak being the chief among all the rafters of a peaked roof, black orris being the chief among all fragrant roots, red sandalwood being the chief among all fragrant heartwoods, jasmine being the chief among all fragrant flowers, wheel-turning monarch being the chief among all petty princes, radiance of the moon being the chief among the radiance of all the stars, the sun in autumn when the sky is clear and cloudless shines and beams and radiates, cassin cloth being the chief among all woven cloths. So here the Buddha is showing you once again, which is essentially the theme of pretty much all the chapters we've studied today, that diligence, determination, dedication, that's what's going to lead you to enlightenment. Because here he's explaining that if you have diligence, that this is going to lead to your development of the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the core central teaching. That is your life practice. You're going to need to develop each one of those factors in order to get to enlightenment. So if you reside determined, dedicated, and diligent, then the Buddha is saying it can be predicted of you that you will cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path, that you'll dial in those 8 individual steps closer and closer in your life practice, and this is what's going to actually lead to your enlightenment. So do you guys have any questions on this chapter or anything else you guys would like to discuss? You can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Looks like we have a question here in Zoom. Max, I'm not sure if you'd like to read it, or I guess I can go ahead. Francis.
I can read it.
Okay, go ahead, Max.
Sorry. How can I eliminate anxieties about not having enough retirement funds during my senior years?
Okay, so whatever you are going to save, Francis, that's what you're going to save. That's what you're capable of saving. And then what you need to do is you just need to adjust your expenses to match what it is that you're capable of saving. If there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind, that's very expensive, and it will be very expensive to live at any point in time, whether it's during retirement or any other times. So you're able to save whatever it is that you save, and you'll be just fine. You're going to have whatever you need to have. But if the mind's longing and yearning, then you're going to have this fear and this anxiety that you're not going to have enough. So just work on throttling back your cravings, understanding that you can eat certain foods, you can have water, you can have shelter, you can have clothing, you can have medical care. Those are the only 5 things that you need in order to sustain your life. Food, water, shelter, clothing, and medical care. Those are the only 5 things. And if you can throttle your cravings back where you're not chasing after all the various things that the mind might be longing and yearning for, you'll find that you can actually live a very simple life with very minimal amount of expenses. But when there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind, it can be very expensive. So be diligent, be dedicated to saving money and making sure you can save, but then be sure that you budget and be sure that you throttle back any cravings and don't allow the mind to chase after things and live an exorbitant life that you can't actually afford.
Francis adds, just go back to living a simple, basic life.
Yeah, that's really all you need. If you can train your mind like that to be peaceful and joyful with a very basic, simple life, then that means if you have extra money or maybe somebody gives you a gift or something like that, you can just maintain your lifestyle, right? Like one of the things that I used to do when I was in the corporate world and I was getting raises and my salary went all the way up to 150,000 a year at one point. What I would do is I like kind of locked in my lifestyle at a certain amount, and then when I kept getting raises, I just kept living that same lifestyle. And then all that extra money I was just putting into the bank at different times. So that way I could just keep my lifestyle just very simple and very basic rather than living this exorbitant lifestyle. So if you can throttle back your cravings, you can live a very basic, simple life with very minimal expenses. And then as you save money and your investments grow and things like that, you don't need to feel like you have to go out and spend that money. You can just maintain this contentedness and this peacefulness and this very simple, basic lifestyle without all this exorbitant material possessions around you. You're welcome, Francis. Pleased to help you. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So what I'll do is just remind you guys that next week in this class, we're going to be moving into the next 10 chapters, which are going to be chapters 31 through 40. So if you'd like to read those before class, because you have the words of the Buddha and you have the words from me to be able to help you reflect on what it is that the Buddha is teaching you, so that then you can potentially have certain points of clarification or things that you need to discuss in this study group, because this study group is very different than the other programs and courses and retreats that I teach, where it is a study group where we're studying together and I'm helping you to be able to understand. And if the more work that you've done through your diligence to study the teachings prior to class, the more benefit that you'll actually get in the class itself. And you might even choose to study after class as well. So the books are all available to you on buddhadailywisdom.com. You can even download it, you can print it yourself, or you can order it on Amazon and get printed copies if you like. Tomorrow in the group learning program, which is Sunday, we're going to be discussing chapter 7, which is the 5 precepts, a householder's guide to daily practice. This is where I'm going to use the words of the Buddha to talk about 5 impactful decisions that you can make in your life, and they can either be wise, that lead to wholesome results, or if you lack wisdom, they'll be unwise, that leads to unwholesome results. So I'm going to use the words of the Buddha to help you understand those, and then I'm going to give you specific examples that will help you learn how to apply them to your day-to-day life. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be in the 4th part of a 4-part series where I'm teaching Buddhist chanting. And then as part of that, we're going to be doing meditation together. So you're welcome to join these live, either 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. each day. Sunday, Wednesday, and Saturday is when I'm teaching these classes. Or if you're not able to make the live classes, there's the recordings on Facebook, YouTube, or on the podcast. So thank you all for participating. Thank you, Max, for your help. Thank you all for your questions and your diligence to learning and practicing the teachings. We'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Sawadee krap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.